My dog went to the bathroom in my living room. X-phemisms, the good, the bad, the straight.
All right, I just want to clarify that the X that we get in X-phemisms is not the same X that you would see in certain movies, X-rated. It's analogous to a mathematical variable. So it stands in for u, dis, ortho, or pho. And I think in this case, it's going to be useful for us to talk about the etymology of the different morphemes that make up the terms that we're going to be using. So we'll start with ism. Ism is just basically a abstract nominalizer. You take a word and it turns it into an abstract noun. Pheme just simply means speech. U means good, and dis means bad. Ortho means straight, and faux, of course, means fake or false. Okay, now put them together and we get euphemism means good speech, dysphemism means bad speech, orthophemism means straight speech, and faux-phemism means fake speech. Here are some examples, and I think once you start getting used to thinking of examples, the terms are pretty intuitive. I think we already, in our minds, categorize words along these lines. So you've got euphemism, do the deed, meaning a substitute for fuck. Then, of course, we've got the dysphemism, fuck. We've got the orthophemism, copulate. And then we've got the faux-phemism, FCUK, which stands for French Connection UK. I guess it's a clothing line. I'm not familiar with them. But anyways, they quite intentionally made their name look like a bad word, so we called that a faux-phemism. In the literature, we often see two approaches to defining X-phemisms. One approach is to take a linguistic meaning approach. This is mental grammar based, and I've got other videos talking about what mental grammar is. This is semantics. It's the study of meaning. It's a semantic approach to it. It has to do with how we understand words in our minds, versus a communicated meaning approach, which is usage-based, where you don't look at the meaning of the words themselves, but rather we look at it context by context and the words in that context and what they communicate at a particular time, in a particular place, by a particular person, to a particular person, and so on. All right, so with that in mind, there are advantages to both approaches, and I think it's useful then to use both. We will then have words that fall under a lexical semantic approach to understanding X-phemisms, and also a usage pragmatic approach. And I'm going to differentiate between them by using nouns for the lexical approach. So when we say that a word is a dysphemism, we're saying that that's part of the meaning of the word. When we say that it's an orthophemism, that's part of the meaning as well as euphemism. Whereas when we take a usage or pragmatic approach, we'll use adjectives. And in that case, these aren't properties of the words themselves, but rather of the use of those words, whether it was used dysphemistically or euphemistically. All right, so now we've got to give our definitions. So we'll start with the semantic definitions. A dysphemism is a taboo linguistic expression. That's it. An orthophemism is a non-taboo linguistic expression with the same informational meaning as some dysphemism. So I do want to clarify this, that it seems that we're equating dysphemisms with taboo words, and there's a good reason it seems that way, because we are. But when I use dysphemism, the reason I use it is to contrast it with other terms that have the same informational meaning. An orthophemism is the sort of the one that we think of as sort of the literal word for it. It's the word that we would use in usually more formal situations, maybe in a clinical situation. Say in a class on biology, we would probably use the word mate instead of fuck. Fuck would be the dysphemism. And then we've got euphemisms, which are avoidance. And the definition we'll use for that is a non-taboo linguistic expression with the same informational meaning as some dysphemism or orthophemism, which acts as a substitute for the dysphemism or orthophemism. And it's that latter part that's so important. It is understood in the language as being a substituting word. That's baked into its meaning, is that it's a substitute for some dysphemism, or sometimes for orthophemism. So for example, with something like die, which isn't technically a taboo word, we do have lots of euphemisms for die because it's an unpleasant topic. And so that's why I put that parenthetical about orthophemisms. I should also note that I say the same informational meaning. But of course, we know that sometimes words, especially taboo words, are not used with any sort of informational meaning. So for example, when you drop a brick on your foot and say, fuck, that's not informational there. You're not saying anything about copulating at that moment. That's just an emotive expression, right? You're swearing emotively. And we can also do that with euphemisms. So we can say things like fudge in that same situation. So I guess the way that I'm getting around this is a logician's way, that if there is no informational meaning, then sort of vacuously that euphemism has the same informational meaning. The key element is that it acts as a substitute for some dysphemism. Now we go into the pragmatic definitions. So we've got dysphemistic and euphemistic. Dysphemistic is a description of an utterance that is offensive in comparison to an alternative expression. And then euphemistic would be a description of an utterance that is polite in comparison to an alternative expression. Notice then that not all dysphemisms will be dysphemistic. It depends on the context. So, for example, in a very formal situation, saying a taboo word is probably not going to be good, right? Or saying it to a stranger, that's probably going to be dysphemistic. Sorry, I gotta go take a shit. But on the other hand, if you're saying it with your buddies, that's probably going to be fine. And in that case, it may actually be considered polite. Sorry, I gotta take a shit. Now, sometimes we conflate politeness and formality. Linguists don't. For us, politeness has to do with whether it is considered offensive by the recipients. So if the recipients aren't offended by it, then it's considered polite. So in that case, a dysphemism in the right context can be euphemistic, and a euphemism in the right context may potentially be dysphemistic.